ahí residen los archivos, ¿no? Que dejó Naomi, Marshall, ¿sí? Y mismo Richard cuando se fue, se llevó archivos que luego sus archivos personales los va a Nueva York. Así que bueno, my dear friends, welcome. So you two friends, welcome. Como dicen los mexicanos, nuestra casa es vuestra casa. Y ahora lo que queremos hacer es 2 momentos breves. Uno, donde todos juntos conversemos de un tópico. Vamos a luego tomar un poco de vino y comer algo para brindar entre todos. Ernesto, ¿de qué vamos a hablar ahora?
Y vamos a hablar de subject that we proposed was to address briefly each one of you, and then asking questions about based on your particular perspectives, both of which are important for us here at the Seminario, the place of the Seminario and its potential within the context of the conservative world today, and world Jewry today as we look to the next century. So, just as a brief.
Something small. You can do first. I'll do the summary.
No, we thought that's it.
We thought you should speak.
Oh,
Yes, you should speak first.
No, you speak in Spanish.
Okay. Yo hablé hoy con los estudiantes del departamento rabínico, me imagino que, y hablamos sobre el desarrollo desde el 59, cuando Marshall llegó, hasta hoy. Y no solamente para decir un poco de historia, como es un artefacto de museo, para hablar sobre el futuro. Yo hablé sobre 2059, porque es 100 años del seminario. Y no soy un profeta, pero de hablar sobre cómo hacemos un seminario, no solamente para el siglo XXI, pero para el siglo XXII. Cómo consideramos la situación que tenemos hoy y proyectar cómo vamos a hacer en el año 2059. Y por eso yo hablé con ellos sobre el desarrollo. 59, Marshall llegó a Buenos Aires con una idea, vamos a decir, radical, porque llegó a la CIRA, Congregación Israelita de la República Argentina, con sus ideas, y tenemos que entender lo que pasó. No era un desarrollo inmediato, pero durante 30 años él llegó a hacer algo distinto. No solamente un movimiento conservador en América Latina, pero algo distinto que no es exactamente movimiento conservador en América Latina. Es algo que es un judaísmo en un momento de nuevo, totalmente nuevo. ¿Por qué? Porque las condiciones en América Latina son distintas. No son las condiciones que tenemos en los Estados Unidos, ni en Europa, ni en Israel, son distintas. Y por eso yo creo que eso era lo que hablé hoy, mañana a la noche, quiero que todos van porque voy a hacer algo con PowerPoint, con fotos, para mostrar realmente algo vivo, lo que tenemos durante los últimos 50 años, y pensar cómo es que el movimiento que tenemos acá puede ayudar al movimiento en Norteamérica, en Europa y en Israel. Porque yo creo que puede ser que el modelo que tienen acá será muy exitoso también en otros lugares del mundo. Y yo sé esto no solamente para estudio en mi mente y pensamientos. Yo digo que yo tengo información porque yo visité con rabinos en todo Norteamérica, en comunidades distintas, donde hay rabinos del seminario y hay rabinos no del seminario. Y tengo que decir que hay una necesidad para rabinos de América Latina en todas partes. Y eso era, yo creo, importante para los estudiantes de escuchar hoy. Que no es un movimiento solamente para América Latina, es un movimiento para el mundo judío entero. ¿Ok? Eso fue. ¿Ok?
So I say one more time that I regret two things. Number one, that I can't speak to you in Spanish. And number two, that I never met Marshall Meyer. And now number three, that when he's giving a talk about Marshall Meyer tomorrow night, I will be on a plane back to the United States.
That we can solve. We will film it and send you the
You think you may solve that, but there's commencement that I have to attend. So that's not the...
I'm going to hopefully publish it in
Okay. And there it will appear in English so that I can then understand it.
Everybody can.
So allow me to react a little bit. I am not an historian. Every time I've been introduced, everybody has told you that I'm a halachist and a Talmudist. And that is absolutely true. I am not an historian. Nonetheless, it seems to me that for a significant part of the history of the conservative movement, there was no question that it was the Jewish Theological Seminary in New York that determined what the conservative movement was. After all, the Jewish Theological Seminary owned the University of Judaism. The University of Judaism was a branch of the Jewish Theological Seminary. The Jewish Theological Seminary owned Machon Shechter in Jerusalem until a few years ago. Everybody who got a degree at Shechter, that degree was not from Shechter, it was from the Jewish Theological Seminary of America. I believe, though I'm not 100% certain, that the seminary owned the Seminario.
Which seminary?
Yours.
JTS?
I don't know.
Own us?
This Seminario.
Yeah.
That the seminary in New York owned...
Never.
No? All right.
God forbid.
Well, I don't know whether God forbid or not. That's a different question.
God forbid or send the check.
We'll discuss that.
Perron never was permitted.
Yes, but wait. Okay, very well. From what I've learned from my tour guide, who has been a wonderful tour guide in every way, it was ultimately Finkelstein, Professor Louis Finkelstein, the chancellor of the seminary in New York, who finally said, yes, let Marshall Meyer go to Buenos Aires and form the Seminario. It is no longer the case that the conservative movement is defined absolutely by the seminary in New York. The University of Judaism, which is now, by the way, called the American Jewish University, it is no longer called the University of Judaism, is independent of the Jewish Theological Seminary in New York. Mahon Schechter is independent of the Jewish Theological Seminary in New York. And between the Jewish Theological Seminary, the American Jewish University, Mahon Schechter, and the Seminario here in Buenos Aires, there are 4 voices that are not united in all things, which are struggling, which are even sometimes combating each other to attempt to define what the conservative movement is. It was not always the case that this was such a big argument. I concede to you that during the heyday of Mordechai Kaplan, who was, I believe, Marshall's mentor.
No.
Well, good. That's even better. That's better. I like that much better.
He used to say that Heschel is his best.
Okay, wonderful. So then I concede to you that in the heyday of Mordechai Kaplan, when Reconstructionism was part of the conservative movement, it was sort of the left wing of the conservative movement, that there was a tremendous battle between Kaplan and his disciples and the vast majority of the faculty of the Jewish Theological Seminary in New York. There was a huge battle between them. I remind you that in 1963, that's not yesterday, right? In 1963, Kaplan left the Jewish Theological Seminary, and his son-in-law formed the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College. From that time until about 20 years ago, the influence of Kaplan went down and down and down and down in New York, in Schechter for sure, where Kaplan's influence was never very great, and at the University of Judaism. About 20 years ago, there was the beginning of a resurgence, of a growth again, of a type of Kaplanian influence. But it wasn't the Kaplan of old. And I would like to tell you what, at least in my opinion, was the fundamental difference between this generation's Kaplanians and Kaplan. I will take as my example of Kaplanian now, my dear friend, Rabbi Neil Gilman. Parenthetical remark, Rabbi Gilman and I, in the opinion of most people, stand at opposite extremes of the conservative movement. But we are exceptionally close friends and have always been close friends. Rabbi Gilman says Judaism must have a halakha, but it doesn't necessarily need to have the halakha. My disagreement with him, you can well guess. But Kaplan did not affirm that the conservative movement had to have even a halakha. When Kaplan said that halakha should have a vote, but not a veto, it meant that he did not perceive any halachic system, whether the halachic system or some other halachic system, he did not perceive that to have binding authority. My dear friends, I have been in this country a grand total of 2 weeks. How much of an expert could I have become? Not very much of an expert in 2 weeks. Right? Probably stay another week and I'll be an expert. Is that what you're trying to tell me? But I do want to tell you one perception that I have. I have found the services in each of the conservative synagogues that I have attended beautiful, moving, attended by more people than I expected to be there. And they were all participating. And I was very impressed by it. I think that Latin American rabbis can bring to the conservative movement a type of vivaciousness. Better say that one in Spanish. Oh, wonderful. Okay. A type of vivaciousness and liveliness that is not so common in the other three places where institutions of the conservative movement exist. But the one thing I find missing in what I have seen in Latin America is anything approaching the concept of obligation. The concept of obligation I did not hear and I did not see in the conservative synagogues that I visited and in anything that I heard from rabbis. Now I have to admit to you, of course, that American conservative rabbis don't talk every time they're on the bima about obligation either. North American Jews are no more excited by the idea of obligation than are Latin American Jews. I'm not denying that. But if asked, it seems to me that any conservative rabbi that I know, either from New York or from Los Angeles, from the University of Judaism, or from Yerushalayim, if asked whether the concept of chovah, of chiyuv, of obligation, is an important concept of conservative Judaism, the answer would be yes. That does not mean they all agree about what the degree of obligation ought to be, or how one should educate Jews toward an idea of obligation, or are there limits to the obligation? All of those things are being I was going to say fought about, and I am going to say fought about, right? Within the conservative movement today. And there is no reason in the world that the conservative movement of Latin America should not have an equal and an equally strong voice in that internal debate about the nature of the conservative movement. The conservative Jewry that I see here in Argentina, and basically only in Buenos Aires, I haven't seen it anyplace else. I know it is there. And I know it is there in other countries of Latin America, except for technical reasons. I was supposed to go last Shabbat to Chile. I couldn't do it, right? and Brazil or Paraguay or Uruguay. I know I'm supposed to go and see those too. But it seems to me that the way the conservative movement functions today, there should be 4 equal voices contributing to the movement's deliberation about what is the conservative movement. And I concede that the conservative movement in New York probably doesn't have to be the same as the conservative movement in Buenos Aires. But the question is, what is it that links all of the elements of the conservative movement, and within which we can have variation and variety to meet the needs of local Jewish communities? And it seems to me that Latin America has as much to contribute to that discussion as North America, the East Coast or the West Coast, and Israel. And I look forward, number 1, to learning Spanish, and number 2, to coming back to visit again, to see the other countries of Latin America, to be part of that discussion. And I see no reason that the Seminario here in Buenos Aires cannot take the lead in that function. And I am convinced it will serve it very, very well.
Tenemos preguntas ahora para compartir con ellos. Sería un buen momento, ¿no es cierto? You've given us, as we say in Spanish, a lot of food for thought. And as we've discussed during our last meeting, and I would like it to be shared with the rest of my people here, what we need at the Seminario is more like you both. Because we know what we know, but we should know a lot about what we don't know. And every time you conspire by telling us things maybe we don't want to hear, or we are not ready to, or we do not agree with, it helps us rethink, re-elaborate, and it gives us, at least in my opinion, my humble opinion, more reasons to fight, to start, or to keep on looking for new answers. But what we need, and we found this when we were given the honor to manage this institution, here, everybody here shares this honor and pleasure, is the challenge to look for more teaching, more to learn, more to think about, and we need some more. We are learning from ourselves, and it's very important that you express your ideas. You disagree or agree with us, doesn't matter, but you help us think. And the same with our new old friend, as Ariel reminded me, you were in charge of the Seminario when at least Ari and me were not thinking about the future. He was the good student, not my case. But having you back is a great sign, because we are still looking for our way, and what you're saying about thinking 50 years ahead is a great challenge. Sometimes we are looking a week ahead, basically because resources restrictions or monetary concerns. But having this special place and being allowed to think 50 years ahead is a great challenge, and it's in the name of the Seminario, thank you both for spending your time and sharing your knowledge with us.
Let me say two quick things.
Thank you.
Number one, three quick things. Number one, thank you. Number two, I have a meeting tomorrow with Ariel and Ernesto. And while I let them set the agenda, I am certain that one of the items on the agenda is how can we increase the teaching from New York here at the Seminario, right? And that teaching involves the teaching of rabbinical students and graduate students and meeting with leadership of the synagogues and the lay leadership of the Seminario. I assure you it is on the agenda. It doesn't mean that we have simple, easy solutions to that, but I promise you that as a result, number one, of having taught a course at the Seminario via Skype and loving it and having enjoyed being here and having had a chance to speak to these various groups, I will see what I can do from New York. Whether I have enough pull in the West Coast or in Los Angeles or Yerushalayim, I don't know. But I'm not bashful, as you all have learned, and I will make every effort to get them involved as well. That's one. Number two, please do not think that people like me, let me say that again. Please do not think that when I speak to lay leaders in the United States, that they all agree with what I say, that they all love what I have to say. Believe me, it is not true. It was not so long ago I spoke to the presidents of the different regions of the United Synagogue. The presidents of different regions of the United Synagogue. And I was myself. I was me. Right? Their reactions were not nearly as polite as yours. Right? To the things that I had to say to them. Also about the concept of obligation and what I think, what kind of role models lay leaders are supposed to be. So don't think that it's only in the conservative movement of Latin America that my words are found to be somewhat challenging. It is the truth in New York and in the United States as well. I haven't spoken so much to the lay leadership in Israel, but I assure you that it would be just as challenging there as in all the other locations. So you're not so unique, right? And I meant that as a positive thing. It is true, you are exactly right. And part of my goal is to challenge students and congregations and leadership of the conservative movement to think carefully about the core elements of the conservative movement.
¿Algún comentario?
Yo puedo dar un comentario. Yo puedo decir, no sé si ustedes saben, yo visité a 25 comunidades en América Latina en los últimos 30 años. Visitar para 2, 3, 4 días. También yo visité 30 estados en los Estados Unidos del movimiento conservador. Y yo creo que puede ser que el seminario puede salvar al movimiento conservador. Salvar al movimiento conservador. Y no es solamente algo de obligación de acá o algo así. Yo creo que la idea del movimiento conservador en América Latina, el concepto del rabinato que tienen, puede salvar al movimiento conservador. Porque hay un problema ahora. Si no hay tujas en el tish, si no hay sillas, no hay personas que están en las congregaciones, no hay algo para hablar sobre obligaciones, porque no hay personas. Si yo tengo una cosa que yo creo que es importante para ustedes entender, es esta institución puede salvar al movimiento conservador. No solamente de inspiración, también pasión y característica rabínica que casi desapareció en otros lugares en el mundo. Si hablamos sobre capital que ustedes tienen, es capital ser humano, especial, y no tiene nada que ver con capital de guita, ¿ok? Eso es algo muy distinto. Y nosotros tenemos que hablar sobre el capital que ustedes sí tienen. Human capital. Human capital.
That's what he told you, sir.
Yeah, and I want to make sure that we...
I think that what you said is very, very interesting. I don't know. I am probably sure that we have more to learn than to teach here in Latin America to the JTS. What I am absolutely sure is that if you want to get some spark of what Latin American Judaism is day by day out of the school of Judaism, you should come to our summer camps and to our youth movements and to see how our non-formal education is transmitted and the values that we transmitted in our synagogues, in our camps, in our summer camps, in our youth movements. And here in Latin America, I believe we have some delicate way to live with intimacy within the families, in which I can invite you to my home in Shabbat, and you don't have to send the post